They said family always comes first, so I signed away my 7-figure inheritance to save Madison from her gambling debts. 3 years later, when my sustainable fashion empire hit the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, suddenly everyone remembered my phone number. The texts flooded in, congratulations mixed with subtle requests for investment opportunities and family loans. I replied to each one with a single message: check your email at midnight tonight. One by one, I watched their confident smiles disappear as they opened my attorney's cease and desist letters. Patricia's panicked voicemail at 12:03 a.m. still makes me smile. No one's asking for handouts anymore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light streaming through my downtown Denver condo windows should have felt like a fresh start, but instead, it illuminated the stack of legal documents that would change everything. I stared at the trust fund transfer papers spread across my granite countertop, my grandfather's signature still visible on the original trust documents beneath them. $7.2 million, accumulated over decades from his renewable energy investments, was about to become someone else's salvation and my financial sacrifice. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and at 28, I had built what most people would consider a comfortable life. My tech consulting firm specialized in helping startups optimize their digital infrastructure, and after 5 years of 18-hour days and weekend client calls, I had finally reached the point where I could afford to be selective about projects. The trust fund had always been my safety net, earning interest in carefully managed portfolios while I focused on building something of my own. I had never touched the principal, taking pride in my ability to succeed independently while knowing the security was there if I truly needed it. The irony wasn't lost on me that my grandfather, who had built his fortune by betting on wind and solar power before they were fashionable, would probably appreciate my stubborn independence. He had always told me that money should work for you, not define you, and that the real measure of success was what you could build with your own hands and mind. Those conversations over hot chocolate in his study, surrounded by engineering journals and investment reports, had shaped my entire approach to business and life. My marriage to Jake Thompson had seemed like a natural progression when we met at a networking event 3 years earlier. He worked in commercial real estate development, part of a family business that had been buying and developing properties throughout Colorado for 2 generations. Jake had the easy charm of someone who had never really struggled for anything, combined with genuine warmth that made him immediately likable. His family welcomed me with what I initially interpreted as enthusiasm, though I later understood it was more like assessment. Patricia Thompson, Jake's mother, ruled her family with the sort of subtle iron fist that wealthy women perfect over generations. She never raised her voice or made direct demands, but somehow everyone always ended up doing exactly what she wanted. Her charity work was legendary in Denver social circles. Her dinner parties were invitations people coveted, and her opinions carried weight in country club conversations throughout Cherry Hills Village. From our first meeting, she had evaluated me with the calculating gaze of someone determining whether I would be an asset or a liability to her family's reputation and fortune. The Thompson family wealth wasn't quite at the level of my trust fund, but it was substantial and steady. Robert Thompson, Jake's father, had inherited a solid foundation from his own father and had expanded it methodically over the decades. They owned strip malls, office buildings, and residential developments throughout the Denver metro area, generating reliable rental income and appreciation that had weathered multiple economic downturns. It was old-fashioned wealth, built on tangible assets and conservative growth strategies that Patricia managed with the same attention to detail she applied to her social calendar. Madison Thompson had always been the wild card in the family equation. 2 years younger than Jake, she possessed the same natural charm but none of his stability or work ethic. While Jake had dutifully joined the family business after college and worked his way up through various departments, Madison had drifted from one passion project to another. Art school in Santa Fe lasted 18 months before she discovered photography. The photography phase evolved into event planning, which morphed into interior design, which eventually led to what she called lifestyle consulting for high-net-worth individuals. Each career pivot came with family-funded startup costs, professional photography for her portfolio, and elaborate launch parties that Patricia organized with military precision. Madison's ventures rarely lasted more than 2 years, and none had ever generated enough revenue to be self-sustaining, but the family had always positioned these as learning experiences rather than failures. Patricia would smile indulgently and mention how creative Madison was, how she needed time to find her true calling, how young women today had so many more opportunities than previous generations. The first signs of serious trouble had emerged 6 months earlier, though the family had been carefully managing the narrative around Madison's latest difficulties. What started as occasional comments about market challenges in the lifestyle consulting industry gradually evolved into more specific concerns about cash flow and difficult clients. Jake would mention offhandedly that Madison was having trouble collecting payments from some of her wealthier clients, or that she was considering pivoting again because the current market wasn't appreciating her unique approach. I had offered practical advice based on my own business experience, suggesting everything from better contract structures to more aggressive collection practices. But my recommendations were consistently dismissed as being too harsh or not understanding the delicate nature of Madison's client relationships. Patricia would smile tightly and explain that Madison worked with a very exclusive clientele who expected a certain level of accommodation and flexibility that my more traditional business background might not fully appreciate. The truth, as it eventually emerged, was far more serious than anyone had initially admitted. Madison hadn't just been struggling with difficult clients or market conditions. She had been gambling, initially with small amounts at charity casino nights and weekend trips to Black Hawk, but escalating to regular visits to underground poker games and online betting that had spiraled completely out of control. The lifestyle consulting business had been hemorrhaging money for over a year, not because of market conditions, but because Madison had been using client deposits to cover gambling debts, creating a cascading series of obligations that she couldn't possibly meet. The family meeting that changed everything took place on a Tuesday evening in November at the Thompson family mansion. Patricia had called it with her usual diplomatic language about discussing some financial planning opportunities that might benefit everyone. But the tension in Jake's voice when he relayed the invitation suggested something more serious was brewing. I arrived to find the entire family assembled in Robert's wood-paneled study, with Madison conspicuously absent, despite this supposedly being about general family finances. Patricia had arranged the seating with her characteristic attention to detail, positioning herself behind Robert's massive mahogany desk, while Jake and I sat across from them like students called to the principal's office. The room felt deliberately intimidating, surrounded by decades of family photographs showing Thompson men in business suits shaking hands at groundbreaking ceremonies and ribbon cuttings. Robert looked genuinely uncomfortable, fidgeting with a paperweight and avoiding eye contact, while Patricia maintained the composed expression she wore to charity board meetings when discussing unpleasant budget realities. The conversation began with Patricia's careful explanation of Madison's situation, framed initially as a temporary liquidity challenge that required family support to resolve quickly and quietly. She spoke in euphemisms about poor business decisions and unexpected market volatility, gradually revealing more specific details about the mounting debts and legal threats that Madison was facing. The gambling addiction was presented as a recent discovery that the family was committed to addressing through professional treatment, but the immediate priority was preventing criminal charges and bankruptcy proceedings that would destroy Madison's future prospects. The numbers, when Patricia finally shared them, were staggering. Madison owed nearly $400,000 to various creditors, including some who were not inclined to wait patiently for repayment through traditional legal channels. The lifestyle consulting business had liabilities exceeding its assets by almost 2 to 1, and Madison's personal guarantees on business loans meant that bankruptcy would still leave her exposed to significant ongoing obligations. The family's liquid assets were tied up in real estate investments and business operations, making it difficult to access the kind of cash needed to resolve the situation quickly. Jake's role in the conversation became clear as Patricia shifted from explaining the problem to proposing solutions. He had clearly been briefed on this approach beforehand because he seamlessly picked up Patricia's narrative thread and began talking about family loyalty and the importance of protecting each other during difficult times. He reminded me of conversations we'd had about my trust fund, specifically my comments about wanting to use inherited wealth responsibly, and my grandfather's philosophy about money being a tool for creating positive impact rather than just accumulating for its own sake. The proposal itself was presented as an investment opportunity rather than a bailout. Patricia explained that Madison was committed to entering a residential gambling addiction treatment program, and that the family was prepared to completely restructure her business obligations and personal finances to prevent any future reoccurrence of these problems. The $400,000 would be used to pay off the most pressing debts and provide working capital for Madison to restart her career on a more sustainable foundation, with ongoing family oversight and professional financial management. My trust fund was positioned as the logical source for this investment because of its size and liquidity, and because the interest it was earning significantly exceeded what Madison's creditors were charging. Patricia had clearly done her research, knowing exactly how much my trust was worth and how the distributions were structured. She presented detailed calculations showing how the $400,000 transfer would actually generate better returns by eliminating high-interest debt and creating positive cash flow through Madison's restructured business activities. The emotional manipulation was subtle, but relentless. Patricia talked about how my grandfather would have appreciated the opportunity to help a young woman rebuild her life and career, how family wealth carried responsibilities as well as privileges, and how this investment would demonstrate the kind of values that create lasting family bonds. Jake added personal touches about how much my willingness to help would mean to him, how he had always admired my generous spirit, and how proud he was to have married someone who understood that true wealth came from lifting others up rather than just protecting your own interests. Robert's contribution was more practical, focusing on the legal and financial structures that would protect my interests while ensuring Madison received the help she needed. He had already consulted with the family's attorneys about the most efficient way to structure the transfer, minimizing tax implications while creating clear documentation of the terms and expectations. The money would be treated as a family loan with reasonable interest rates and a repayment schedule tied to Madison's business recovery, ensuring that I would eventually be made whole while giving her the breathing room needed to rebuild. The pressure wasn't aggressive or confrontational, but it was constant and overwhelming. Every concern I raised was met with detailed explanations and reassurances. Every hesitation was addressed with additional emotional appeals about family loyalty and moral obligation. Patricia had clearly orchestrated this conversation to anticipate and counter every possible objection, creating a situation where refusing to help would make me appear selfish and uncaring, regardless of the practical considerations involved. Madison herself finally appeared near the end of the meeting, clearly having been coached on her role in this performance. She was tearful and apologetic, acknowledging her mistakes while emphasizing her commitment to recovery and her determination to repay every dollar with interest. She talked about how much my willingness to help would mean to her, how she had always looked up to me as a successful businesswoman, and how she wanted to use this second chance to build something meaningful, rather than just continuing the pattern of family bailouts that had enabled her poor decisions. The meeting concluded with Patricia suggesting that I take a few days to consider the proposal and discuss it with my own financial advisors, though the underlying message was clear that this was really just a formality before signing the necessary paperwork. Jake was uncharacteristically quiet during the drive home, though he squeezed my hand supportively and mentioned how proud he was of my willingness to even consider helping his sister during such a difficult time. That night, Lying awake beside my sleeping husband, I wrestled with conflicting emotions and practical concerns that seemed impossible to reconcile. Part of me genuinely wanted to help Madison, recognizing that addiction was a disease rather than a moral failing, and that family support could be crucial for her recovery. The financial impact, while significant, wouldn't leave me destitute or unable to maintain my current lifestyle, and Patricia's arguments about using inherited wealth responsibly weren't entirely wrong, but something about the entire situation felt carefully orchestrated in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. The timing of the family meeting, the detailed financial analysis that Patricia had obviously prepared in advance, the emotional appeals that seemed designed to make refusal impossible rather than helping me make an informed decision, all suggested a level of planning that went far beyond a family rallying to support someone in crisis. I spent the next 2 days researching gambling addiction treatment programs, consulting with my own financial advisor about the proposed loan structure, and trying to have honest conversations with Jake about his family's expectations and my own concerns about setting precedents for future financial requests. The treatment programs were legitimate and expensive. The loan terms were reasonable if Madison actually followed through on her recovery and business rebuilding commitments. And Jake seemed genuinely convinced that his family was approaching this crisis responsibly, rather than just throwing money at a recurring problem. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My financial advisor was more skeptical, pointing out that family loans often become gifts regardless of the initial intentions, and that $400,000 represented a significant percentage of my total trust fund assets. He suggested alternative approaches like funding the treatment program directly rather than providing cash to pay off existing debts, or structuring the assistance as a series of smaller loans tied to specific recovery milestones rather than a lump sum transfer. When I raised these alternatives with Jake, his response revealed just how committed the family was to their specific approach. He became defensive about the suggestion that they hadn't thought through the best way to help Madison, arguing that my advisor didn't understand the complex relationships between Madison's business debts and her gambling obligations. He emphasized the time pressure they were facing, with some creditors threatening legal action that could result in criminal charges if payments weren't made within the next 2 weeks. The final conversation took place that Thursday evening, with just Jake and me in our condo overlooking downtown Denver. The city lights spread out below us like scattered diamonds, and I remember thinking how different everything looked depending on your perspective, and how much distance you had from the actual details. Jake had obviously been rehearsing his arguments, because he presented a comprehensive case for why the family's approach was not only correct, but really the only viable option for saving Madison's future. He talked about how much this decision would mean for our marriage, how his family's opinion of me would be permanently influenced by my willingness to step up during this crisis, and how proud he would be to have a wife who understood that true partnership meant supporting each other's families during difficult times. The emotional manipulation was more direct than Patricia's careful orchestration, but it was also more honest about what was really at stake in terms of my relationship with the Thompson family. That night, I made the decision that would change the trajectory of my life in ways I couldn't possibly anticipate. I agreed to transfer $400,000 from my trust fund to resolve Madison's gambling debts and provide her with a fresh start. The paperwork was completed within 3 days, with Robert's attorneys handling all the details and ensuring that everything was properly documented for tax and legal purposes. The money disappeared into Madison's creditors' accounts with remarkable efficiency, and she dutifully entered an expensive residential treatment program in Arizona that specialized in gambling addiction recovery for high-net-worth individuals. The family celebrated the resolution of the crisis with a dinner at the country club, toasting Madison's courage in confronting her problems and my generosity in making her recovery possible. I had saved my sister-in-law from bankruptcy and criminal prosecution, preserved my marriage's relationship with Jake's family, and demonstrated the kind of values that my grandfather had always emphasized about using wealth responsibly. What I didn't realize was that I had also painted a target on my back and established myself as the family's go-to solution for future financial problems, while creating expectations about my role that would ultimately prove impossible to maintain. The first subtle signs of change appeared within weeks of the money transfer, though I initially dismissed them as temporary stress reactions to the crisis we had just resolved. Patricia's warmth toward me seemed to increase, but it came with a possessive quality that made me uncomfortable. She began including me in family business discussions that had previously been limited to blood relatives, seeking my opinion on investment decisions and property acquisitions with an intensity that felt more like evaluation than genuine consultation. Madison's recovery program required family involvement sessions, and I found myself cast in the role of supportive sister-in-law who had sacrificed financially to make her treatment possible. The counselors praised my commitment to family healing, and Madison expressed gratitude that felt both genuine and performative. But even during these sessions, I noticed how the narrative had subtly shifted to emphasize my wealth and generosity, rather than focusing primarily on Madison's recovery and personal accountability. Jake's behavior toward me evolved in ways that were difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. He was more affectionate and attentive than he had been in months, frequently mentioning how proud he was of my decision and how much it meant to his family that I had stepped up during the crisis. But this increased attention came with subtle monitoring of my spending habits and casual questions about my remaining trust fund balance that felt more like inventory management than marital conversation. The most troubling changes involved my relationship with my own financial independence and decision-making autonomy. Patricia began treating me less like Jake's wife and more like a junior partner in Thompson Family Enterprises, expecting consultation on my business decisions and offering unsolicited advice about investment opportunities that would benefit the family's collective portfolio. When I mentioned considering expanding my tech consulting firm or investing in startup opportunities, these discussions were redirected toward more conservative approaches that would preserve capital for potential future family needs. 3 months after Madison completed her treatment program, the carefully constructed narrative of family loyalty and successful crisis resolution began to unravel in ways that revealed the true dynamics underlying my trust fund sacrifice. Madison's return to Denver was celebrated with another family dinner, but her recovery proved to be more complicated than anyone had publicly acknowledged, and the financial problems that had necessitated my intervention were far from resolved. Madison's triumphant return to Denver should have marked the end of our family crisis, but instead, it became the beginning of my awakening to just how thoroughly I had been manipulated. The treatment program in Arizona had cost an additional $60,000 beyond what we had initially discussed, a detail that Patricia mentioned casually during Madison's welcome home dinner, as though it were a minor administrative oversight, rather than a significant additional expense that had been automatically deducted from my trust fund account. The explanation came with Patricia's characteristic blend of apology and expectation management. The program directors had determined that Madison needed extended treatment beyond the standard 90-day protocol, and the family had made the difficult decision to authorize the additional time rather than risk her recovery by cutting the program short. The extra costs had been handled through the existing financial arrangements to avoid disrupting Madison's therapeutic progress with stressful discussions about money, and Patricia was certain I would understand that Madison's health had to take priority over strict adherence to the original budget. I sat at that dinner table, listening to Madison describe her recovery journey and watching the family celebrate her progress, while calculating that my trust fund sacrifice had actually totaled nearly $500,000 without any discussion or consent for the additional expenses. The casual way this information was delivered, buried in gratitude and medical necessity, revealed a level of entitlement to my resources that I found both shocking and infuriating. Jake's response when I raised concerns about the unauthorized expenditures was even more troubling than Patricia's presumptuous handling of my money. He genuinely seemed surprised that I would focus on financial details rather than celebrating Madison's successful completion of treatment, and he suggested that my reaction indicated a level of selfishness that didn't reflect well on my character or my commitment to family values. The conversation devolved into our first serious argument since the original crisis, with Jake accusing me of being petty and materialistic, while I struggled to explain why the principle of financial consent mattered regardless of the worthy cause. Madison's behavior during those first weeks back in Denver provided additional evidence that the expensive treatment program had been less transformative than the family wanted to believe. She had undoubtedly learned the appropriate language about addiction recovery and personal accountability, but her actions suggested that the underlying attitudes and behaviors remained largely unchanged. She moved back into her childhood bedroom in the Thompson mansion rather than finding independent housing, claiming that the treatment program had recommended a gradual transition to full autonomy to prevent relapse triggers. Her approach to rebuilding her career followed a similar pattern of therapeutic justification for avoiding genuine responsibility. Madison announced that her counselors had advised against returning to lifestyle consulting because the irregular income and high stress client relationships had been contributing factors to her gambling behavior. Instead, she planned to explore opportunities in the family real estate business, where she could utilize her creative skills in property staging and marketing while benefiting from the stable environment and built-in support system that her recovery required. The family business integration was presented as a temporary arrangement to support Madison's transition back to professional life, but the financial implications quickly became apparent. Her salary was set at a level that reflected her potential contribution rather than her actual experience in real estate, and her position came with flexible scheduling and reduced accountability that accommodated her ongoing therapy appointments and recovery meetings. The additional payroll expense was absorbed into the overall business budget, but the family's casual comments about tightened cash flow and the need for more conservative spending suggested that Madison's employment was straining their resources. Patricia's increasing involvement in my business decisions became more pronounced and more problematic as the months passed. What had initially seemed like motherly interest in my entrepreneurial success evolved into expectations that my consulting firm would prioritize projects that benefited Thompson family interests or connected social networks. She began suggesting potential clients from her charity work and country club connections, framing these referrals as opportunities for me to expand my influence in Denver's business community while helping worthy causes. The pressure was subtle, but persistent, delivered through conversations about family reputation and mutual success, rather than direct demands for specific actions. Patricia would mention how proud she was to tell her friends about my consulting expertise, then casually note that several of her charity board members were struggling with technology challenges that seemed perfectly suited to my skills. When I didn't immediately pursue these leads, she would follow up with gentle questions about my client acquisition strategies and suggestions about the importance of building relationships within established Denver social circles. Jake's support for his mother's involvement in my business was unwavering and increasingly problematic. He had begun describing my consulting firm as a family asset rather than my individual professional achievement, and he regularly shared details about my client projects and revenue with his parents despite my repeated requests for privacy about business matters. His justification was that his family's connections and reputation were valuable resources that I should be leveraging more effectively, and that transparency about my business success demonstrated trustworthiness and commitment to our shared financial future. The most disturbing development was the gradual erosion of my decision-making autonomy regarding the remaining trust fund assets. Patricia had positioned herself as an informal financial advisor, offering investment recommendations and expressing concerns about my portfolio diversification with the authority of someone who had a legitimate stake in my financial decisions. Her suggestions consistently favored conservative investments that would preserve capital for potential future family needs, rather than growth opportunities that might benefit my individual long-term objectives. These conversations were always framed in terms of protecting my interests and ensuring responsible stewardship of inherited wealth. but the underlying message was clear that my financial decisions were subject to family approval and oversight. When I mentioned considering investments in technology startups or expanding my consulting firm's service offerings, Patricia would express concern about the risks involved and suggest postponing such ventures until Madison's situation was more stable and the family's overall financial picture was more secure. The breaking point came 8 months after Madison's return to Denver, during what Patricia called a family financial planning meeting, but which felt more like an intervention, designed to formalize the expectations and obligations that had been building since my original trust fund sacrifice. The meeting was held in Robert's study again, with the same deliberate staging and power dynamics that had characterized the original crisis discussion, but this time the agenda was expansion rather than emergency response. Patricia opened the conversation by reviewing the family's collective financial position, including detailed information about my consulting firm's revenue and my remaining trust fund balance that could only have come from Jake's reports on our private conversations. She presented this information as evidence of the family's overall prosperity and stability, emphasizing how my contributions had been instrumental in achieving this positive outcome and positioning my ongoing involvement as essential for maintaining their upward trajectory. The proposal that emerged from this financial review was breathtaking in its scope and presumption. Patricia suggested establishing a formal family investment fund that would pool resources from all family members to pursue larger opportunities in real estate development and business acquisitions. My remaining trust fund assets would form the foundation of this investment vehicle, providing the capital base needed to compete for the kind of high-value projects that could generate substantial returns for everyone involved. The structure Patricia outlined would give me a proportional ownership stake in the family investment fund based on my capital contribution, but the management and decision-making authority would rest with Robert and Jake as the family members. With real estate expertise and established business relationships, Madison would also receive an ownership interest based on her sweat equity contribution through her work in the family business, and future profits would be distributed according to ownership percentages rather than capital contributions. My trust fund assets would be transferred into this family investment fund gradually over the next 2 years, allowing time to optimize tax strategies and investment timing while providing the family business with the working capital needed to pursue aggressive expansion opportunities. Patricia presented detailed projections showing how this approach would generate significantly higher returns than my current conservative investment strategy, while also creating the kind of family wealth legacy that my grandfather would have appreciated. The emotional manipulation accompanying this financial proposal was even more sophisticated than what I had experienced during Madison's crisis. Patricia talked about how successful families throughout history had built lasting wealth through collective action and shared commitment, and how this investment fund would formalize the family loyalty and mutual support that had already proven so beneficial for everyone involved. She emphasized the opportunity for me to become a true partner in building something larger than any individual could achieve alone. Jake's enthusiastic support for his mother's proposal revealed just how extensively they had discussed and planned this approach without any input from me. He spoke knowledgeably about specific investment opportunities the family had been considering, market trends in Colorado real estate development, and strategic advantages that the additional capital would provide for competitive positioning against other development firms. His presentation suggested months of preparation and consultation with financial and legal advisors who had been engaged without my knowledge or participation. Robert's contribution focused on the legal and tax advantages of the proposed structure, including detailed analysis of estate planning benefits and wealth preservation strategies that would protect family assets across generations. He had clearly consulted with the family's attorneys and accountants about the optimal way to structure this investment fund, and he presented documentation showing how the arrangement would minimize tax liability while maximizing growth potential for all participants. Madison's role in the presentation was to demonstrate her transformation from liability to asset, showcasing her recovery progress and her contributions to the family business while expressing gratitude for the opportunity to rebuild her life. through meaningful work and family support. She talked about her vision for expanding the family business into luxury property staging and high-end marketing services, opportunities that would require additional capital investment but could generate substantial revenue growth if properly funded and executed. The pressure to commit to this family investment fund was overwhelming and relentless, delivered through a combination of financial projections, emotional appeals, and subtle threats about the consequences of refusing to participate in this collective family vision. Patricia made it clear that my decision would be interpreted as a measure of my commitment to the family and my marriage, while Jake emphasized how much this opportunity meant to him personally and professionally. The meeting concluded with the same expectation management that had characterized the original crisis discussion, with Patricia suggesting that I take time to review the proposal with my financial advisors, while making it clear that the family's ability to pursue these time-sensitive opportunities depended on my prompt commitment to the investment fund structure. The underlying message was that refusing to participate would be seen as selfish betrayal of family loyalty and shared prosperity. That night, I made copies of all the financial documents and projections that had been presented during the meeting, and I began conducting my own research into the investment opportunities and business strategies that the family was proposing. What I discovered over the following weeks revealed a level of financial distress and questionable decision-making that completely contradicted the rosy picture of family prosperity that Patricia had presented. The Thompson family real estate business was struggling with cash flow problems that went far beyond the temporary strain of Madison's salary and recovery expenses. Several of their properties were carrying unsustainable debt loads, and they had been deferring maintenance and capital improvements to preserve operating cash flow. The aggressive expansion opportunities they were promoting required additional capital not because of growth potential, but because they needed funding to service existing obligations and avoid defaulting on current investments. Madison's integration into the family business had been even more problematic than I had realized. Her flexible schedule and reduced accountability had created resentment among other employees, and her lack of relevant experience had resulted in several costly mistakes that had damaged client relationships and delayed project completions. The family's decision to maintain her employment despite these performance issues was creating operational inefficiencies that were undermining the business's overall profitability. Most disturbing of all, my research revealed that Madison's gambling addiction recovery was far from complete. She had been frequenting several Denver-area casinos within weeks of her return from treatment, and her credit card statements showed online gambling activity that suggested a significant relapse. The family was either unaware of this continued gambling or choosing to ignore it while focusing on extracting additional resources from my trust fund to cover the ongoing financial damage. The investigation into my own financial situation revealed that the original trust fund transfer had been structured in ways that made recovery of those assets extremely difficult, if not impossible. The loan documentation that Robert's attorneys had prepared was heavily weighted in Madison's favor, with repayment terms that could be extended indefinitely based on her recovery needs and business development timeline. The family had effectively gained permanent access to $460,000 of my inheritance while providing me with essentially worthless promissory notes that would never be enforced. My financial advisor's review of the proposed family investment fund confirmed my worst suspicions about the true purpose of this arrangement. The structure would give me proportional ownership, but no meaningful control over how my capital was deployed, while exposing me to unlimited liability for the family business's existing debts and future obligations. The projected returns were based on optimistic assumptions about market conditions and operational improvements that ignored the underlying problems plaguing the Thompson family enterprises. As I absorbed the full scope of the financial manipulation and emotional exploitation that had been orchestrated around my trust fund, I experienced a clarity that was both liberating and terrifying. Everything about my relationship with Jake's family had been carefully calculated to extract maximum financial benefit while providing minimum genuine reciprocity or respect. I had been evaluated, targeted, and systematically exploited by people who viewed my inherited wealth as a family resource rather than my individual asset. The confrontation with Jake about my discoveries was devastating in ways that went far beyond the financial betrayal. When I presented evidence of his family's financial distress and Madison's continued gambling, his immediate response was defensiveness and deflection rather than acknowledgement or accountability. He accused me of spying on his family and violating their privacy, suggested that my suspicions indicated a lack of trust that threatened our marriage, and insisted that any problems I had uncovered were temporary challenges that could be resolved through continued family cooperation and support. His refusal to acknowledge the manipulation and exploitation that had characterized our entire relationship with his family's financial needs forced me to confront the reality that Jake was not an unwilling participant in these schemes, but an active collaborator who had been reporting on my financial situation and personal decisions from the beginning of our marriage. The trust and partnership that I had believed formed the foundation of our relationship had been illusory, sacrificed to family loyalty and financial opportunity without any genuine consideration for my interests or autonomy. The decision to leave Denver and everything I had built there was not made impulsively, but it crystallized with sudden certainty during a family dinner where Patricia announced the next phase of her financial planning for my resources. She had arranged meetings with additional attorneys and investment advisors to finalize the family investment fund structure, and she expected my participation in these consultations as a demonstration of my commitment to moving forward with the collective wealth-building strategy that would benefit everyone involved. I listened to her detailed timeline for transferring my remaining trust fund assets, her projections for how quickly the family business could expand with adequate capital infusion, and her vision for how this financial partnership would strengthen family bonds and create lasting prosperity for future generations. The casual presumption that my money and my future were available for her disposal, combined with Jake's enthusiastic support for his mother's plans, made me realize that there was no possibility of negotiating a more equitable arrangement or maintaining any independence within this family structure. That night, while Jake slept beside me, I began researching opportunities in Austin, Texas, where several former clients had mentioned the thriving technology startup ecosystem and growing demand for experienced consultants who could help emerging companies scale their operations efficiently. The city offered the perfect combination of professional opportunities and geographic distance from Denver, along with a business culture that rewarded innovation and entrepreneurship rather than inherited connections and conservative wealth preservation. The planning for my escape from the Thompson family's financial manipulation required the same careful attention to detail that had characterized my business success. But this time the stakes were my personal freedom and professional future rather than client satisfaction and revenue growth. I opened new bank accounts that Jake could not access, transferred my business operations to encrypted cloud storage systems, and began the process of dissolving my consulting firm's Colorado legal structure while preserving the intellectual property and client relationships that would form the foundation of my new venture. The most difficult aspect of planning my departure was accepting that my marriage to Jake was irreparably damaged by his participation in his family's exploitation of my trust fund and his unwillingness to acknowledge or address the fundamental betrayal of trust and respect that had characterized our entire relationship with his family's financial needs. The man I had fallen in love with either had never truly existed or had been completely subsumed by family loyalty and financial pressure that made him incapable of functioning as an independent partner in our marriage. 3 weeks after Patricia's announcement about finalizing the family investment fund, I implemented my exit strategy with the same precision and efficiency that had made my consulting business successful. I transferred the remaining assets from my trust fund to accounts that only I could access, terminated my consulting firm's operations in Denver, and purchased a one-way ticket to Austin with nothing but 2 suitcases and the determination to rebuild my life and career on my own terms. The note I left for Jake was brief and final, explaining that I could not participate in his family's continued financial exploitation, and that our marriage had been irreparably damaged by his willingness to prioritize family loyalty over partnership and honesty. I made it clear that any attempts to contact me or recover my trust fund assets would be met with legal action, and that I considered our relationship concluded as of that moment. The flight to Austin felt like emerging from underwater after holding my breath for longer than seemed humanly possible. As the plane lifted off from Denver International Airport, I watched the Rocky Mountains disappear below me and experienced a combination of grief and liberation that was unlike anything I had ever felt before. I was leaving behind everything familiar and secure, but I was also escaping from a situation that had been systematically destroying my autonomy, my self-respect, and my ability to make independent decisions about my own life and resources. Austin welcomed me with the vibrant energy of a city that celebrated innovation and rewarded bold decision-making rather than inherited privilege and conservative conformity. The downtown skyline that greeted me as my taxi crossed the Colorado River was a testament to rapid growth and technological advancement, populated by entrepreneurs and visionaries who had built something meaningful through their own efforts rather than family connections and inherited resources. The first apartment I could afford in Austin was a modest one-bedroom unit in East Austin, a far cry from my downtown Denver condo, but exactly what I needed to start rebuilding my life from scratch. The neighborhood was a mix of young professionals, artists, and longtime residents who had watched the area transform from industrial wasteland to trendy destination over the past decade. My neighbors included a software developer who worked remotely for a San Francisco startup, a graphic designer who specialized in branding for local restaurants, and a retired teacher who had lived in the same house for 40 years and served as the unofficial neighborhood historian. The apartment itself was sparse but functional, with exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and large windows that filled the space with natural light throughout the day. I furnished it gradually with pieces from local thrift stores and artisan markets, creating a living environment that reflected my own aesthetic choices rather than the conservative traditional style that Patricia had always favored for family gatherings. Each purchase was deliberate and personal, from the vintage leather armchair where I read business journals every morning to the handmade pottery that held my coffee and displayed fresh flowers from the farmer's market. Dr. Helen Chang became my lifeline during those first crucial months in Austin, though our initial meeting was entirely accidental. I had been working from a coffee shop near the University of Texas campus, struggling with the isolation of freelance consulting after years of office-based collaboration, when I overheard her phone conversation about supply chain optimization challenges for sustainable manufacturing. Her expertise and passion for ethical business practices were immediately apparent, and when she concluded her call, I introduced myself and mentioned my background in technology consulting for startups. Helen was in her early 50s, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from building something meaningful through decades of careful planning and strategic execution. She had immigrated from Taiwan as a graduate student in the 1990s, earned her PhD in industrial engineering, and spent 15 years in corporate consulting before launching her own sustainable fashion company. Her business focused on creating beautiful, durable clothing using environmentally responsible materials and ethical manufacturing processes, competing directly with fast fashion giants by demonstrating that consumers would pay premium prices for products that aligned with their values. Our professional relationship began with my helping her optimize the technology infrastructure supporting her e-commerce platform and supply chain management systems, but it quickly evolved into something closer to mentorship as she recognized both my technical skills and my hunger for meaningful work. Helen had built her company from a single product line sold at local markets to a multi-million-dollar enterprise with national distribution and international recognition, and she understood the challenges facing entrepreneurs who were trying to create something significant without inherited advantages or family connections. The transformation of my consulting practice from desperate freelancing to strategic business development happened gradually but steadily under Helen's guidance and example. She introduced me to other entrepreneurs in Austin's sustainable business community, recommended me for technology consulting projects that aligned with my values, and helped me understand how to position my services as strategic partnerships rather than tactical support. Her network included founders who were building everything from renewable energy systems to organic food distribution platforms, all united by their commitment to creating positive environmental and social impact through profitable business models. My first major breakthrough came 6 months after arriving in Austin, when Helen connected me with Marcus Webb, the founder of a startup that was developing software for tracking and reducing carbon emissions in supply chains. Marcus had secured initial funding based on his environmental science background and compelling vision, but his technology platform was struggling with scalability issues that threatened to undermine his relationships with early adopters and potential investors. He needed someone who could redesign his architecture to handle exponential growth while maintaining the data accuracy and user experience that differentiated his product from competing solutions. The project with Marcus required me to work closely with his development team for 3 months, essentially functioning as an interim chief technology officer while helping him recruit permanent technical leadership. The work was challenging and intensive, requiring me to master complex algorithms for environmental impact calculation while also addressing fundamental issues with database design, user interface optimization, and system integration capabilities. The experience reminded me how much I thrived when tackling difficult technical problems that had meaningful real-world implications rather than just generating revenue for clients. Marcus's company achieved a successful Series A funding round 6 months after I completed the platform redesign, raising $12 million from investors who were impressed by the dramatic improvements in system performance and customer satisfaction metrics. My consulting fee for the project was substantial, but more importantly, Marcus insisted on offering me equity in the company as recognition of my contribution to their success. The equity grant was modest compared to what founding team members received, but it represented my first ownership stake in a business that I had helped build rather than just advised. Word of my success with Marcus's company spread rapidly through Austin's interconnected startup ecosystem, generating consulting opportunities with other entrepreneurs who needed experienced technical leadership but couldn't afford permanent, executive-level hires. I began specializing in helping sustainable technology companies optimize their operations during critical growth phases, combining my technical expertise with increasing knowledge of environmental business models and impact measurement frameworks. The consulting practice that emerged from these early Austin projects was fundamentally different from what I had built in Denver, focused on partnerships with mission-driven entrepreneurs rather than traditional corporate clients who viewed technology as a cost center rather than a strategic advantage. My clients were building companies that addressed climate change, social inequality, and resource scarcity through innovative business models that required sophisticated technology platforms to achieve scale and impact. Working with these founders reminded me daily that business success could be measured by positive change as well as financial returns. Helen's influence on my personal development was as significant as her professional mentorship, helping me recognize how much my identity and self-worth had become entangled with other people's expectations and approval during my marriage to Jake. She had experienced her own version of family pressure to prioritize stability and traditional success over entrepreneurial risk-taking, and she understood the psychological work required to rebuild confidence in your own judgment after years of compromise and accommodation. Our conversations often took place during long walks through Austin's extensive trail system, where the physical movement seemed to facilitate the emotional processing required for genuine personal growth. Helen shared stories about her own journey, from conservative family expectations to entrepreneurial independence, including the difficult decision to leave a lucrative corporate consulting career to pursue her vision of sustainable fashion, despite skepticism from family members who couldn't understand why she would abandon security for uncertainty. The parallels between Helen's experience and my own situation were striking, particularly her description of how family loyalty had been weaponized to discourage her from pursuing opportunities that might reduce her availability to support relatives' financial needs and expectations. She had eventually realized that true family support meant encouraging each other's authentic success rather than demanding sacrifice of individual goals for collective security, and that healthy relationships required boundaries around financial obligations and decision-making autonomy. Under Helen's guidance, I began developing the emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that would eventually enable me to address the Thompson family's continued attempts to manipulate and exploit my resources. She helped me understand that my anger about their betrayal was justified and necessary, but that effective response required channeling that energy into building something positive, rather than simply seeking revenge or validation from people who had demonstrated their unwillingness to respect my autonomy. The sustainable fashion industry became my unexpected education in business models that prioritized long-term value creation over short-term profit maximization, supply chain transparency over cost minimization, and stakeholder benefit over shareholder returns. Working with Helen and her network of industry colleagues, I learned how companies could generate substantial financial returns while also creating positive environmental and social impact, challenging the false choice between profitability and responsibility that had characterized much of my previous business experience. My consulting work began incorporating these principles as I helped technology startups design systems that measured and optimized for multiple forms of value creation, rather than focusing exclusively on traditional financial metrics. The technical challenges were complex and fascinating, requiring integration of environmental impact data, social outcome measurement, and stakeholder engagement platforms with traditional business intelligence and customer relationship management systems. The personal satisfaction I derived from this work was unlike anything I had experienced during my Denver consulting practice, where success was measured primarily by client revenue growth and operational efficiency improvements. In Austin, I was helping entrepreneurs build companies that addressed urgent global challenges while creating meaningful employment opportunities and generating returns for investors who shared their commitment to positive impact. The work felt aligned with my values in ways that made the long hours and technical complexity energizing rather than draining. By my first anniversary in Austin, my consulting practice had evolved into something closer to a boutique investment advisory firm specializing in sustainable technology companies. I was working with a select group of entrepreneurs who valued long-term strategic thinking over quick fixes, and who were building businesses that could scale globally while maintaining their commitment to environmental and social responsibility. My technical expertise had expanded to include artificial intelligence applications for environmental monitoring, blockchain systems for supply chain transparency, and data analytics platforms for measuring social impact. The financial success of my Austin ventures was significant, but secondary to the personal satisfaction of building something meaningful through my own efforts and strategic decisions. My consulting fees had increased substantially as my reputation for delivering transformative results spread through the startup community, and the equity stakes I had accumulated in client companies were appreciating rapidly as these businesses achieved funding milestones and revenue growth targets. More importantly, I had rebuilt my confidence in my own judgment and decision-making abilities after years of second-guessing myself in response to Thompson family pressure and manipulation. Working with Helen and her network of successful entrepreneurs had reminded me that my technical skills and strategic thinking were valuable assets that could create significant positive impact when applied to meaningful challenges, rather than just generating profits for established businesses. The personal transformation that accompanied my professional success was equally significant, involving the development of boundaries and self-advocacy skills that I had never learned during my marriage to Jake. Helen's mentorship had helped me understand that healthy relationships required mutual respect and support, rather than one-way sacrifice and accommodation, and that my worth as a person was not determined by my willingness to meet other people's financial expectations or emotional needs. Austin's culture of entrepreneurship and innovation provided the perfect environment for this personal and professional development, surrounding me with people who had taken significant risks to pursue their authentic goals rather than accepting conventional definitions of success and security. The city attracted individuals who were building new kinds of businesses, creating innovative solutions to complex problems, and challenging established industries through superior products and services rather than inherited advantages or political connections. The contrast between Austin's merit-based business culture and Denver's relationship-driven social hierarchy became increasingly apparent as I established myself within the sustainable technology community. Success in Austin was measured by your ability to create value and solve problems, rather than your family connections or inherited resources, and collaboration was based on mutual benefit and shared goals, rather than social obligations and networking strategies. My social life in Austin developed organically around shared interests and values rather than the careful social positioning that had characterized my Denver experience with Jake's family. I formed genuine friendships with other entrepreneurs and professionals who appreciated my technical expertise and strategic thinking, and who offered support and encouragement based on respect for my accomplishments rather than expectations about my financial resources or family obligations. The contrast was particularly evident in how these new relationships handled financial topics and business opportunities. Austin entrepreneurs discussed money and investment as tools for creating positive impact rather than measures of personal worth or social status, and they approached collaboration as mutual support for shared goals rather than extraction of resources from those who had achieved greater financial success. Dr. Helen Chang's influence extended beyond professional mentorship to include guidance on wealth building and investment strategies that aligned with my values and long-term objectives. She had successfully navigated the transition from high-income professional to business owner and investor, and she understood how to leverage financial resources to create additional opportunities rather than simply preserving inherited wealth through conservative investment approaches. Under Helen's guidance, I began investing in early-stage sustainable technology companies that were developing innovative solutions to environmental and social challenges. These investments required careful due diligence and strategic thinking, but they offered the potential for substantial financial returns while also contributing to positive global impact through supporting entrepreneurs who shared my commitment to responsible business practices. The investment portfolio that emerged from this approach was more dynamic and engaging than the conservative trust fund management that had characterized my Denver financial strategy. Rather than simply earning passive returns on inherited assets, I was actively participating in building companies that addressed urgent global challenges while generating wealth through value creation rather than speculation or financial engineering. My first significant investment success came 18 months after arriving in Austin, when a renewable energy software company that I had supported through both consulting services and early-stage funding was acquired by a major utility corporation for 8 times its initial valuation. My combined consulting fees and equity returns from that transaction exceeded what I had earned during my entire final year in Denver, and the experience validated my decision to focus on sustainable technology ventures rather than traditional corporate consulting. The success stories began accumulating as my portfolio companies achieved funding milestones, revenue growth targets, and strategic partnerships that increased their valuations and market impact. Each success reinforced my confidence in the investment thesis that sustainable technology companies could generate superior financial returns while also creating positive environmental and social outcomes, challenging the conventional wisdom that responsible investing required sacrificing profitability for principles. More importantly, these successes were generating wealth through my own strategic decisions and value creation, rather than inheritance or family connections, creating financial independence that was genuinely earned rather than simply preserved. The psychological difference was profound, representing autonomy and achievement rather than obligation and preservation of family legacy. By the end of my second year in Austin, my consulting practice and investment portfolio had generated more wealth than I had possessed before transferring nearly $500,000 to resolve Madison's gambling debts. The financial recovery, was significant, but the personal transformation was even more valuable, involving the development of confidence, independence, and strategic thinking capabilities that would have been impossible to achieve within the constraints of my marriage. To Jake and his family's expectations, the sustainable fashion venture that would eventually become my primary business focus emerged from a casual conversation with Helen about gaps in the market for professional clothing that met both environmental and aesthetic standards. Traditional business attire was dominated by fast fashion companies that prioritized low costs over quality or sustainability, while eco-friendly alternatives often sacrifice style and performance for environmental credentials. Helen had been considering expanding her company into professional wear, but lacked the technology expertise needed to build the sophisticated e-commerce platform and supply chain management systems that would be required for successful entry into that competitive market segment. The opportunity to combine my technology skills with her fashion industry knowledge and sustainable business model expertise represented the perfect synthesis of everything I had learned during my Austin transformation. Our partnership began as a consulting engagement to design the technology infrastructure for Helen's professional wear expansion, but it quickly evolved into something more substantial as we recognized the potential for creating a completely new kind of fashion company. Rather than simply adding professional clothing to Helen's existing product lines, we began developing a comprehensive business model that would revolutionize how working professionals approached wardrobe planning and sustainable consumption. The technology platform we designed integrated artificial intelligence for personalized styling recommendations, blockchain systems for supply chain transparency, and data analytics for measuring environmental impact and social outcomes across every aspect of the business. The result was a shopping experience that helped customers build curated wardrobes of high-quality, sustainable professional clothing while providing complete visibility into the environmental and social impact of their purchasing decisions. The business model combined subscription-based styling services with direct sales of carefully curated professional wear from sustainable manufacturers around the world. Customers could access personal styling consultations, receive customized clothing recommendations based on their professional needs and personal preferences, and build wardrobes that reflected their values while meeting the practical requirements of their careers. The environmental impact measurement and reporting capabilities built into our platform allowed customers to track the carbon footprint, water usage, and labor practices associated with their clothing purchases, creating accountability and transparency. That was unprecedented in the fashion industry. This data also enabled us to continuously optimize our supply chain partnerships and product selections to minimize negative impact while maximizing quality and customer satisfaction. The social impact component of our business model included partnerships with organizations that provided professional clothing and career development support to women entering the workforce, creating a direct connection between our customers' purchases and positive outcomes for women who needed support accessing professional opportunities. A percentage of every sale was automatically donated to these organizations, while customers could choose to contribute additional amounts or volunteer time for career mentoring and professional development programs. The launch preparation for our sustainable professional wear platform required 6 months of intensive development work, combining technology platform creation with supply chain partnership development, brand identity design, and marketing strategy implementation. Helen's fashion industry expertise and sustainable business model knowledge were essential for navigating the complex relationships with manufacturers, fabric suppliers, and logistics providers that would determine our ability to deliver high-quality products at competitive prices while maintaining our environmental and social commitments. My technology background enabled us to build a platform that provided superior user experience and operational efficiency compared to traditional fashion retailers, while also incorporating the measurement and reporting capabilities that differentiated our approach from both conventional and sustainable competitors. The result was a business that could compete effectively on quality, price, and convenience, while also delivering meaningful environmental and social impact. The personal satisfaction of building something meaningful and valuable through my own efforts and strategic decisions was unlike anything I had experienced during my years in Denver, focused on preserving inherited wealth and managing family relationships. Every aspect of the business reflected choices that Helen and I had made based on our values and vision, rather than external expectations or obligations, creating ownership and autonomy that felt genuinely earned rather than inherited or granted. As we prepared for the official launch of our sustainable professional wear platform, I reflected on the transformation that had brought me from desperate escape from family manipulation to entrepreneurial partnership with someone I respected and admired. The journey had required courage, persistence, and willingness to rebuild everything from scratch, but it had resulted in personal and professional fulfillment that far exceeded what I had lost when I walked away from my Denver life and marriage. The launch of our sustainable professional wear platform exceeded every projection we had dared to make, transforming from ambitious startup to industry disruptor within months of going live. The combination of Helen's fashion expertise and my technology infrastructure created a shopping experience that resonated powerfully with professional women who had been searching for clothing that aligned with their values without compromising their career requirements. Our first month generated more revenue than Helen's original company had achieved in its entire first year, and the customer acquisition metrics indicated sustainable growth potential that attracted attention from investors and industry analysts across the country. The success was gratifying on multiple levels, validating not only our business model and execution strategy, but also the personal transformation that had brought me from financial manipulation victim to successful entrepreneur within just 2.5 years. Every milestone we achieved represented progress that I had earned through strategic thinking and hard work, rather than inherited advantages or family connections, creating a sense of accomplishment that was entirely different from the hollow victories I had experienced trying to meet Thompson family expectations in Denver. The technology platform that powered our rapid growth incorporated artificial intelligence algorithms that I had developed specifically for fashion recommendation systems, creating personalized styling suggestions that improved with each customer interaction. The system learned individual preferences for color, fit, and style, while also considering professional requirements, budget constraints, and sustainability priorities to generate recommendations that felt genuinely helpful rather than purely commercial. Customers frequently commented that our platform understood their needs better than traditional personal shoppers, while also providing transparency about environmental and social impact that was impossible to find elsewhere in the fashion industry. The supply chain partnerships that Helen had cultivated enabled us to offer professional clothing that met the highest standards for quality and durability while maintaining competitive pricing through efficient operations and strategic sourcing. Relationships. Our manufacturing partners included small family businesses in Portugal that specialized in sustainable textiles, cooperatives in Peru that produced organic cotton using traditional techniques, and innovative companies in South Korea that had developed new methods for creating luxury fabrics from recycled materials. Each partnership was structured to ensure fair compensation for workers, environmental responsibility throughout the production process, and transparency that allowed customers to trace every item back to its origins and understand the true cost and impact of their purchases. The complexity of managing these relationships while maintaining consistent quality and delivery schedules required sophisticated logistics coordination and quality control systems that I had designed specifically for our unique business model. The social impact component of our business model generated unexpected emotional engagement from customers who appreciated the direct connection between their purchases and positive outcomes for women entering the workforce. Our partnerships with organizations providing professional clothing and career development support created feedback loops that demonstrated tangible results from customer contributions, including success stories from women who had secured employment or promotions after receiving interview clothing and professional development coaching funded by our sales. The customer testimonials and impact reports we published quarterly became powerful marketing tools that attracted new customers while also deepening loyalty among existing buyers who could see how their spending was contributing to meaningful social change. The transparency and accountability we provided around both environmental and social impact created differentiation that was impossible for traditional fashion retailers to replicate without fundamental changes to their business models and supply chain relationships. My role in the partnership with Helen evolved rapidly from technology consultant to co-founder and chief operating officer as the business scaled beyond what either of us could manage individually. The transition happened organically as customer demand and operational complexity exceeded our initial projections, requiring additional investment in technology infrastructure, inventory management, customer service capabilities, and strategic planning that could only be sustained through formal business partnership rather than consulting arrangement. The equity structure we negotiated reflected both our initial contributions and our ongoing responsibilities, with Helen retaining creative control and brand vision, while I assumed responsibility for technology development, operations management, and strategic growth planning. The partnership was formalized through legal documentation that protected both our interests while creating aligned incentives for long-term success rather than short-term profit maximization. The second round of funding we secured 9 months after launch validated our business model and growth potential while providing capital for aggressive expansion into new market segments and geographic regions. The investors included venture capital firms that specialized in sustainable business models, family offices that prioritized impact investing, and strategic partners from the fashion and technology industries who could provide expertise and relationships that would accelerate our growth trajectory. The funding process required extensive due diligence and financial planning that demonstrated the sustainability of our business model and the scalability of our technology platform and supply chain operations. The investor presentations I developed showcased not only our financial performance and growth projections, but also our environmental impact metrics and social outcome measurement systems that differentiated our approach from traditional fashion companies seeking investment. The valuation we achieved during this funding round exceeded my wildest expectations when I had first arrived in Austin with nothing but determination to rebuild my life and career. My equity stake in the company was now worth more than my original trust fund had been before I transferred nearly $500,000 to resolve Madison's gambling debts, representing wealth that I had created through my own strategic thinking and execution rather than inherited from family investments. More importantly, this wealth was generating positive environmental and social impact while also providing financial returns, creating alignment between my personal values and my business interests that had been impossible to achieve during my years focused on preserving inherited assets and managing family relationships. The contrast between passive wealth preservation and active value creation was profound, affecting not only my financial position, but also my sense of purpose and personal fulfillment. The industry recognition that accompanied our business success included features in major fashion publications, sustainability awards from environmental organizations, and speaking invitations at conferences focused on responsible business practices and women's entrepreneurship. These opportunities elevated my profile within the sustainable business community, while also creating networking relationships that would prove valuable for future business development and investment opportunities. The speaking engagements were particularly meaningful because they provided platforms to share my story about transitioning from corporate consulting to entrepreneurial leadership, while also promoting the importance of sustainable business practices and transparent supply chain management. The audiences included other entrepreneurs seeking to build impact-driven companies, investors interested in sustainable business models, and established companies exploring opportunities to improve their environmental and social performance. My presentation style evolved to emphasize practical strategies and measurable outcomes rather than theoretical discussions about sustainability and social responsibility, reflecting my technology background and results-oriented approach to business development. The feedback from conference attendees consistently highlighted appreciation for concrete examples and implementation frameworks that they could adapt for their own businesses and investment decisions. The personal brand that emerged from this speaking and writing activity positioned me as an expert in sustainable technology applications for fashion and retail industries, creating consulting opportunities with established companies that wanted to improve their environmental performance and social impact measurement capabilities. These engagements generated substantial additional revenue while also expanding my network within industries that could benefit from the technology solutions and business model innovations we had developed. The Forbes 30 Under 30 recognition that arrived 2 years after our initial launch represented validation from the broader business community that our approach to sustainable fashion was not only environmentally and socially responsible, but also commercially viable and scalable. The selection process had been rigorous, requiring detailed financial documentation, customer testimonials, industry expert recommendations, and strategic vision presentations that demonstrated our potential for continued growth and impact. The announcement of my inclusion on the Forbes list generated immediate attention from media outlets, potential customers, and business partners who had previously been unaware of our company and its innovative approach to professional fashion. The publicity created opportunities for retail partnerships, corporate client relationships, and strategic alliances that would have taken years to develop through traditional sales and marketing efforts. More significantly for my personal journey, the Forbes recognition represented public acknowledgement of the success I had achieved through my own efforts and strategic decisions after walking away from family financial manipulation and marital compromise. The achievement was entirely mine, earned through risk-taking, hard work, and innovative thinking rather than inherited advantages or family connections. The timing of this recognition coincided with subtle attempts by the Thompson family to re-establish contact with me, suggesting that news of my business success had reached Denver social circles where Patricia maintained her network of relationships and information sources. The initial contacts were indirect, coming through mutual acquaintances who mentioned that Jake's family had been asking about my current situation and expressing interest in reconnecting to celebrate my achievements. These feelers were carefully constructed to appear casual and friendly rather than manipulative or self-interested, but the pattern was familiar from my previous experience with Thompson family communications. The messaging emphasized how proud they were of my success, how much they had always believed in my potential, and how unfortunate it was that family misunderstandings had prevented them from maintaining closer relationships during my entrepreneurial journey. Jake's personal attempts to re-establish communication were more direct, but equally transparent in their underlying motivations. His messages acknowledged that our marriage had ended badly and expressed regret about family pressures that had contributed to our relationship problems. But the focus quickly shifted to admiration for my business success and suggestions that we could benefit from renewed friendship and professional collaboration. The subtext of Jake's communications was clear to anyone who understood Thompson family dynamics and financial priorities. His construction company was struggling with the same cash flow problems that had plagued the family business for years. Madison's gambling addiction recovery remained incomplete despite expensive treatment programs, and Patricia's social standing in Denver was being undermined by financial pressures that limited her ability to maintain the lifestyle and charitable commitments that defined her identity. Madison's own outreach was perhaps the most revealing, combining congratulations on my business success with detailed descriptions of her own ongoing recovery progress and professional development achievements. Her messages emphasized how much she had learned from her mistakes, how grateful she remained for my family's support during her crisis, and how excited she was about opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the family business and Denver community. The underlying message was that Madison had finally stabilized her life and was prepared to begin repaying the family investments that had enabled her recovery, but the repayment timeline was being complicated by challenging market conditions and conservative family business strategies that limited growth opportunities. The implication was that additional capital infusion could accelerate both her personal debt repayment and the family business expansion that would benefit everyone involved. Patricia's approach was more sophisticated, involving indirect communications, through mutual acquaintances and strategic social media engagement that demonstrated her awareness of my business achievements while avoiding direct contact that might appear presumptuous or manipulative. Her strategy seemed designed to create opportunities for natural reconnection that would allow her to express family pride and support without explicitly acknowledging the financial exploitation that had prompted my departure from Denver. The charity fundraising invitation that arrived during this period was typical of Patricia's indirect approach, requesting my participation in a Denver-based sustainable fashion awareness event that would supposedly benefit environmental education, programs for underprivileged children. The invitation acknowledged my expertise in business success, while creating a socially acceptable pretext for family reunion and relationship rebuilding that would be difficult to refuse without appearing selfish or vindictive. My response to these various outreach attempts was carefully calculated to acknowledge receipt while maintaining complete control over the terms and timing of any potential re-engagement with the Thompson family. I expressed appreciation for their interest in my business success, while making it clear that my focus remained on continued company growth and impact expansion rather than personal relationship management or family obligation fulfillment. The strategic documentation project that I had been developing since my departure from Denver had evolved into a comprehensive archive of evidence regarding the financial manipulation and emotional exploitation that had characterized my relationship with Jake's family. The collection included email communications, financial records, medical documentation, legal agreements, and witness statements that provided irrefutable proof of the calculated nature of their campaign to extract resources from my trust fund. This evidence archive was organized and maintained not for immediate use, but as insurance against potential future attempts to manipulate or discredit me, should the Thompson family decide that indirect persuasion was insufficient for achieving their financial objectives. The documentation was stored securely with copies provided to my attorney and financial advisors, creating protection against both legal challenges and reputational attacks that might be launched if my continued success made me an attractive target for more aggressive extraction attempts. Carlos Martinez, my closest friend in Austin and an experienced entrepreneur who had navigated his own family financial pressures, served as my advisor and sounding board for developing appropriate responses to Thompson family outreach attempts. Carlos understood both the emotional complexity of family relationships and the practical importance of maintaining clear boundaries around financial obligations and decision-making autonomy. His guidance emphasized the importance of maintaining professional courtesy while avoiding any commitments or communications that could be interpreted as acceptance of family financial obligations or willingness to provide ongoing support for Thompson family business interests. Carlos had observed similar patterns in other successful entrepreneurs' experiences with family members who appeared supportive when resources were needed, but became critical or demanding when their expectations weren't met. The sustainable fashion industry continued to provide opportunities for personal and professional growth that reinforced my decision to focus on building meaningful wealth through value creation rather than preserving inherited assets through conservative investment strategies. The work remained challenging and fulfilling, requiring continuous innovation and adaptation as customer expectations evolved and competitive pressures increased from both traditional fashion companies and new sustainable alternatives. Helen's partnership had become one of the most important relationships in my life, providing both professional collaboration and personal friendship that was based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than financial obligations or social expectations. Our working relationship was characterized by open communication, complementary skills, and aligned incentives that created genuine partnership rather than the compromised collaboration that had characterized my business relationships in Denver. The company culture we had developed reflected both our personal values and our business model commitments, creating an organization that attracted talented employees who were motivated by purpose as well as compensation. The team included individuals with experience at major fashion retailers, sustainable manufacturing companies, technology startups, and impact measurement organizations, bringing diverse perspectives and expertise that enhanced our ability to innovate and execute effectively. The board of directors we had assembled through our funding rounds included accomplished entrepreneurs, experienced investors, and industry experts who provided strategic guidance and networking relationships that accelerated our growth while maintaining focus on sustainable business practices and social impact measurement. The board meetings were characterized by substantive discussions about long-term strategy rather than short-term profit maximization, reflecting the values and objectives that had attracted our investors to participate in our mission. The customer community that had developed around our brand created unexpected opportunities for deeper engagement and feedback that improved both our products and our impact measurement capabilities. Many customers became advocates who shared their experiences through social media, professional networks, and personal relationships, generating word-of-mouth marketing that was more effective than traditional advertising for reaching our target demographic. The expansion opportunities that emerged from our initial success included potential international markets, additional product categories, and strategic partnerships that could accelerate growth while maintaining our commitment to sustainable practices and supply chain transparency. Each opportunity required careful evaluation to ensure alignment with our values and capacity for execution, without compromising the quality and impact standards that differentiated our brand. The investment portfolio that I had developed alongside my operating business continued to generate returns that provided financial security and additional capital for pursuing new opportunities. The portfolio included early-stage sustainable technology companies, established impact-driven businesses, and real estate investments in Austin's rapidly growing technology district, creating diversification and growth potential that exceeded what conservative trust fund management could have achieved. The personal satisfaction of building genuine wealth through strategic thinking and value creation continued to provide motivation for taking calculated risks and pursuing ambitious goals rather than focusing on wealth preservation and family obligation management. Every business decision was made based on alignment with my values and strategic objectives rather than external expectations or social pressure, creating autonomy and fulfillment that had been impossible to achieve during my marriage to Jake. As the 3-year anniversary of my departure from Denver approached, I reflected on the transformation that had brought me from financial manipulation victim to successful entrepreneur and industry leader. The journey had required courage, persistence, and willingness to rebuild everything from scratch, but it had resulted in personal and professional achievements that exceeded my most optimistic expectations when I had boarded that one-way flight to Austin with nothing but determination and 2 suitcases. The first sign that my carefully constructed distance from the Thompson family was about to collapse came through an unexpected phone call from my former college roommate, Sarah, who still lived in Denver and moved in the same social circles where Patricia maintained her influence. Sarah's voice carried an excitement that immediately put me on guard, as she gushed about seeing my name in Forbes and how everyone in Denver was talking about my incredible success story. What Sarah shared next made my blood run cold. Patricia had been hosting intimate dinner parties where she regaled guests with stories about how she had always believed in my potential and had encouraged my entrepreneurial journey from the very beginning. According to Patricia's revised history, the Thompson family had been instrumental in supporting my business development, and my success reflected their superior judgment in recognizing talent and providing the guidance that had enabled my achievements. The audacity of Patricia's narrative reconstruction was breathtaking, but it also revealed the sophisticated nature of her campaign to reposition herself and her family as contributors to my success rather than obstacles I had overcome. By claiming credit for my achievements, she was laying groundwork for renewed contact and potential resource extraction that would be justified by their supposed investment in my development. Sarah mentioned that Patricia had been asking detailed questions about my current business operations, living situation, and relationship status, gathering intelligence that suggested she was planning some form of direct outreach. The casual nature of these inquiries embedded in social conversations about my success, demonstrated Patricia's skill at extracting information without appearing intrusive or manipulative to the people she was using as sources. I ended the call, with Sarah feeling the familiar knot of anxiety that had characterized my final months in Denver. But this time, the emotion was accompanied by cold, analytical thinking about how to respond to what was clearly the opening phase of a renewed Thompson family campaign. The difference was that I now possessed resources, confidence, and strategic planning capabilities that had been entirely absent during my previous encounters with their manipulation. Helen's reaction when I shared Sarah's intelligence was immediate. Concern followed by strategic thinking about how to prepare for what seemed like inevitable contact attempts. Her experience with family pressure and manipulation provided valuable perspective on the psychology of people who viewed successful relatives as assets to be managed rather than individuals to be respected. And she helped me recognize that my continued avoidance might actually be encouraging more aggressive outreach attempts. The planning session that emerged from our discussion focused on developing proactive strategies for managing renewed Thompson family contact rather than simply reacting to whatever approaches they might attempt. Helen's guidance emphasized the importance of controlling the narrative and maintaining decision-making autonomy, while also gathering intelligence about their current motivations and financial circumstances. Carlos joined our strategic planning when Helen and I concluded that the Thompson family's renewed interest likely indicated significant financial distress that made my resources particularly attractive compared to their limited alternatives. His network of contacts throughout the Colorado business community could provide objective information about the family's actual circumstances rather than relying on their selective disclosure and emotional manipulation. The research that Carlos conducted over the following weeks painted a picture of Thompson family finances that was far worse than I had imagined during my departure from Denver. The real estate development business that had been the foundation of their wealth was hemorrhaging money due to over-leveraged properties and declining market conditions that had trapped them in projects they couldn't complete or profitably exit. Jake's construction company was facing potential bankruptcy after losing 2 major commercial contracts due to quality issues and project delays that had destroyed their reputation among Denver's commercial development community. The equipment loans and facility expenses that had supported their operations during successful periods were now crushing overhead that couldn't be sustained by the small residential projects that represented their only remaining revenue source. Robert's health problems had created additional financial pressure through medical expenses that weren't fully covered by insurance, while also limiting his ability to actively manage the business operations that required his expertise and relationships for continued viability. The combination of health crisis and financial distress had created a perfect storm that threatened to destroy everything the family had built over decades. Madison's situation was perhaps the most alarming, as her gambling addiction recovery had proven temporary, and her relapse had involved embezzlement from family business accounts that created potential criminal liability in addition to financial losses. The family was spending substantial resources on legal representation, while also covering the restitution required to prevent prosecution, further straining their already desperate cash flow. Patricia's social standing was being undermined by the family's financial problems, as her inability to maintain previous levels of charitable giving and social entertaining was becoming obvious to the Denver society community, where reputation and influence were closely tied to financial resources and lifestyle maintenance. The prospect of losing her social position was potentially more devastating to Patricia than the financial losses themselves. Armed with this intelligence, I understood that any renewed contact from the Thompson family would involve requests for financial assistance that would dwarf the original trust fund transfer, and that their approach would likely escalate in intensity and manipulation if initial attempts were unsuccessful. The charity gala invitation that arrived shortly after Carlos completed his research was exactly the sophisticated opening gambit I had expected from Patricia. The Denver Museum of Contemporary Art Sustainable Fashion Awareness Gala was perfectly designed to create social pressure for my participation. while also providing Patricia with a prestigious venue for demonstrating her continued relevance and connections within Denver's philanthropic community. The invitation listed me as a featured speaker and award recipient, creating public expectations that would make refusal appear ungracious and vindictive. The guest list included every major figure in Denver's business and social communities, ensuring that my decision about participation would be widely observed and discussed. Patricia had obviously invested considerable time and resources in organizing an event that would maximize social pressure while also providing her with opportunities for private conversations and relationship rebuilding that would be difficult to avoid in such a public setting. My decision to accept Patricia's invitation was made after careful consideration of strategic factors rather than emotional reactions to family manipulation. The event would provide an opportunity to demonstrate my transformation and success while also gathering intelligence about the family's current circumstances and motivations. More importantly, controlled re-engagement on my terms could provide closure that had been impossible to achieve through continued avoidance. The preparation for returning to Denver involved comprehensive planning with Helen and Carlos to ensure that every aspect of my appearance and behavior would project strength, confidence, and independence rather than the defensive uncertainty that had characterized my previous interactions with the Thompson family. Every detail was calculated to demonstrate the success I had achieved while maintaining clear boundaries around personal and financial autonomy. Helen's decision to accompany me as my business partner provided both professional credibility and personal support that would be crucial for maintaining perspective during what would inevitably be emotionally challenging interactions with people who had systematically exploited my trust and resources. Her presence would also serve as a witness to family behavior and a source of objective feedback about manipulation attempts. The wardrobe selection for the gala was strategic messaging about my transformation, featuring pieces from our sustainable fashion line that showcased both personal style and business success, while also representing the values-driven approach that had made our company successful. Every element was designed to project confidence and achievement, rather than the people-pleasing accommodation that had characterized my previous family interactions. The private jet transportation to Denver represented both practical convenience and symbolic demonstration of the success I had achieved since leaving the city 3 years earlier. The luxury accommodation at Denver's most exclusive hotel provided a neutral environment for any family meetings while avoiding the emotional triggers associated with familiar locations from my marriage to Jake. The charity gala itself exceeded all expectations for attendance and media coverage, with Denver's most influential business and social leaders gathering to support sustainable fashion initiatives, while also witnessing what many recognized as my triumphant return to the city where my family drama had played out so publicly years earlier. Patricia had outdone herself with event organization that created perfect staging for her carefully planned reconciliation campaign. My presentation about sustainable fashion innovation and social impact measurement was received with enthusiastic applause and widespread media coverage that positioned me as a thought leader whose achievements brought positive recognition to Denver's business community. The speech provided an opportunity to share my entrepreneurial journey while avoiding any reference to family relationships that might distract from the business message. The private reception following my presentation was where Patricia's true objectives became apparent, as she had carefully orchestrated seating arrangements and conversation opportunities that would create natural openings for family discussions, while surrounded by influential witnesses who would observe our interactions. The manipulation was sophisticated, but entirely predictable to someone who understood her psychology and strategic thinking. Jake's approach to our reunion was a carefully rehearsed performance combining personal remorse about our failed marriage with professional admiration for my business achievements, suggesting that our shared history could form the foundation for renewed friendship and potential collaboration. His presentation was polished but transparently self-interested to anyone who understood the family's current financial circumstances. The conversation with Jake revealed extensive preparation and research about my business success, with detailed knowledge about revenue growth, funding rounds, and industry recognition that could only have come from systematic intelligence gathering. His questions about expansion plans and investment strategies were framed as friendly interest but clearly designed to assess opportunities for Thompson family involvement or benefit. Madison's participation in the reunion was emotionally challenging because she had obviously been coached to present herself as genuinely recovered from gambling addiction while expressing gratitude for my previous financial assistance and willingness to make amends for the problems she had caused. Her performance was convincing, but undermined by subtle behavioral signs that suggested continued instability and desperation. Patricia's private conversation with me near the end of the reception was the culmination of her evening's work, combining emotional manipulation about family bonds with strategic opportunity presentation about business collaboration that was designed to make refusal appear selfish and short-sighted. Her proposal involved complex family business restructuring that would provide capital infusion for Thompson Enterprises while creating investment opportunities for me. The financial projections Patricia presented were optimistic, but not entirely unrealistic, and the proposed structure appeared to protect my interests while enabling family business recovery. However, the underlying reality was that my investment would primarily serve to prevent Thompson family bankruptcy rather than generating meaningful returns, with capital requirements potentially exceeding $2 million over 18 months. My response to Patricia's proposal was diplomatically noncommittal, expressing appreciation while citing the need for thorough due diligence and advisor consultation before making investment decisions. The response avoided immediate confrontation, while also avoiding commitments that could be interpreted as acceptance of family financial obligations or partnership arrangements. The follow-up communications that began within days of my return to Austin revealed escalating desperation and willingness to abandon subtle persuasion in favor of more aggressive manipulation tactics. Jake's messages became frequent and emotionally intense, combining guilt about our failed marriage with pressure about family loyalty that portrayed my reluctance to invest as betrayal of people who had always supported my success. Madison's outreach included detailed financial disclosures about her current situation and repayment commitments, designed to demonstrate reformed character while creating emotional pressure through descriptions of potential consequences if family support was withdrawn. Her communications emphasized how much my investment would mean for her continued recovery, framing financial assistance as humanitarian support rather than business opportunity. Patricia's approach remained sophisticated, involving strategic communications through mutual acquaintances and indirect social pressure through Denver business community connections who had been enlisted to encourage my participation in family business recovery efforts. The campaign was comprehensive and persistent, designed to create multiple influence sources that would make continued resistance appear unreasonable. The breaking point came when Jake made an unannounced visit to Austin that violated clear boundaries I had established about family communication and demonstrated the lengths to which the Thompson family was prepared to go in pursuit of my resources. His appearance at my office building was calculated to create public pressure and emotional manipulation that would be difficult to resist without appearing cruel. The confrontation with Jake in my office was our first direct communication since my departure from Denver, and it revealed how thoroughly desperation had overwhelmed any genuine concern for my well-being or respect for my autonomy. His presentation combined emotional appeals about shared history with detailed financial projections about family business recovery opportunities, creating a comprehensive pitch that had obviously been prepared in consultation with Patricia. Jake's revelation that the family had consulted attorneys about potential legal challenges to my business assets based on community property laws and marital relationship obligations was particularly disturbing, representing explicit threats designed to coerce compliance with their financial demands. The legal theory was questionable but potentially expensive to defend against, creating leverage for forced settlement negotiations. My response to Jake's threats was immediate implementation of legal protections and evidence documentation that had been prepared over the previous 3 years. Cease and desist letters were delivered within hours, while comprehensive evidence packages were transmitted to family members and their attorneys to demonstrate the futility of pursuing legal challenges or continued harassment. The evidence packages contained irrefutable documentation of financial manipulation and emotional exploitation that had characterized my relationship with the Thompson family, including communications, financial records, witness statements, and medical documentation that proved the calculated nature of their campaign to extract resources from my trust fund and control my decision-making autonomy. The Thompson family's response to receiving this evidence documentation was swift panic that confirmed they had underestimated both my preparation for potential conflict and my willingness to defend myself against continued manipulation. Patricia's immediate phone call reflected desperation that contrasted sharply with her usual composed manipulation tactics, while her acknowledgement of immediate foreclosure threats and potential criminal charges provided context for understanding their urgency. The settlement negotiation that emerged was entirely on my terms, with the Thompson family recognizing that continued harassment would result in public disclosure of their financial manipulation and legal challenges that would destroy Patricia's remaining social credibility while exposing them to potential fraud charges related to the original trust fund extraction. The charitable foundation I established using business profits provided the perfect vehicle for addressing the Thompson family's crisis, while achieving social impact objectives that had motivated my entrepreneurial journey. The foundation's mission focused on financial education and addiction recovery support for families affected by gambling problems, creating positive outcomes from negative experiences I had endured. The Foundation's first major initiative involved partnerships with Denver area organizations, providing gambling addiction treatment and financial counseling services, creating comprehensive support systems for families dealing with problems that had characterized Madison's situation. The program included family education components, addressing enabling behaviors and manipulation tactics that often perpetuated addiction cycles. The announcement of the Foundation's establishment generated significant media coverage that positioned my business success as the foundation for meaningful charitable work while providing indirect commentary on the Thompson family situation, without violating settlement agreement confidentiality provisions. The coverage emphasized commitment to using wealth for positive social impact rather than personal enrichment or lifestyle maintenance. The business expansion that followed our Denver confrontation exceeded all previous growth projections as media coverage and industry recognition created new opportunities for customer acquisition and strategic partnerships that accelerated market penetration and revenue growth. Public validation of our business model and social impact mission attracted customers and investors who shared our commitment to sustainable business practices. As I reflected on the complete transformation that had brought me from financial manipulation victim to successful entrepreneur and industry leader, I recognized that the Thompson family's betrayal had ultimately provided motivation and opportunity for achieving success that exceeded anything I could have accomplished while constrained by their expectations and manipulation. Their greed had inadvertently set me free to discover my own potential and build something meaningful through strategic thinking and personal effort. The empire I had built represented not just financial success, but personal growth, professional achievement, and social impact that created lasting value beyond individual wealth accumulation. The contrast between my approach to success and the Thompson family's approach to resource extraction demonstrated fundamental differences in values and priorities that made their manipulation attempts both predictable and ultimately self-defeating. The final satisfaction came not from dramatic confrontation or public humiliation, but from the quiet knowledge that their attempts to exploit my resources had instead motivated me to build something far more valuable and meaningful than they could have imagined. Their panic upon discovering my success was sufficient validation of my transformation and their recognition of what they had lost through betrayal and manipulation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.